virtue of phronesis. Now, what does this virtue actually indicates? Look here. Phronesis is the ability to distinguish between virtuous and vicious behavior, and this ability to distinguish itself is a virtue. समझ में आया? The virtue of phronesis is the virtue to distinguish between virtuous and vicious behavior. So it's the ability to differentiate between what is virtuous and what is vicious, and this ability itself is a virtue or a positive trait of your character. Got it? Now, this virtue of phronesis should be possessed by legislators. Legislators, through their laws, should first highlight what is virtuous and what is vicious, then guide the people towards virtuous behavior. That is what most of the ethicists thought, that legislators should have this virtue. The virtue is the virtue of phronesis. Phronesis simply means the ability to distinguish between virtuous and vicious behavior, and then helping people to move towards virtuous behavior. Now, suppose when a law is made, suppose, say for example, there is a simple law on social empowerment, and you can understand that social empowerment is a broader term and will include all kinds of empowerment, like empowerment of the depressed sections of the society or empowerment of women, all those kind of things, right? So suppose this is a law which is trying to promote social empowerment. So first it will highlight what are the challenges to empowerment. Do you understand that? Or it will highlight that what are the social evils that are present in the society, and then it will define what is empowerment, what are the advantages of empowerment, and then the law will finally give a call to action, that what the state should do, or what the agencies should do, what the institutions should do, what the society should do as a whole, so that we can achieve the common objective of social empowerment. समझ में आया? And this entire thing is actually a virtue, and that virtue is the virtue of phronesis. तो फिर से मैं दोहरा रहा हूं एक बार, phronesis है क्या? Phronesis is the ability to distinguish between virtuous and vicious behavior, and then helping people to move towards virtuous behavior. This ability to distinguish and then guide people toward virtuous behavior itself is a virtue, and that is known as the virtue of phronesis. ठीक है? Most important advantage of virtue ethics is that it focuses on the person. It does not focus on the action or the consequences of the action. Even a murderer can do charity then, and you would say that the outcome is good, therefore the action is good. So virtue ethics focuses on the person and not on the action or the consequences of the action. That's one big advantage of virtue ethics, which inspires us to be more human, to accumulate virtues, to aggregate the positive traits in our character. Virtue ethics is an inspiration. Remember what Aristotle says, you have to look up to the moral exemplars, look what they do, how do they behave, and try to inculcate things from them. In fact, in our syllabus also you will find one line, lessons learned from leaders, administrators, reformers, etc. It's actually nothing but lessons learned from moral exemplars of Aristotle. Do you get it? So that's one big advantage of virtue ethics, that virtue ethics inspires you to be more human. Virtue ethics' second advantage is that it inspires you to improve your character. First, it is focusing on the person. Second advantage is it inspires you to work on your character. because virtues are the positive traits of your character. It helps you traverse through the spectrum of morality. Remember, there is something called the vicious man, and on the other end there is something called the virtuous man. And this transit is the aim of the virtue ethicist, isn't it? That you have to move from vicious to virtuous. It means that's the upward spiral that every virtuous ethicist is focusing upon, or every moral philosopher who espouses or who recommends virtue ethics focuses upon. The third advantage of virtue ethics is that you cannot take holidays from the virtues. So virtue ethicist would say that a virtuous man is a man over whom you can depend, because he won't take holidays. He is not bothered about the consequences of the action or the action. So you don't have to care about the action or the consequences of the action. You have to only focus on the man. If the man is good, naturally he will do the right thing that will create the good effect in the society. So there is no chance of taking holidays from your virtues. If you are taking holidays from your virtues, you are not a virtuous person. You are a vicious person, incontinent or continent person, whatever the case may be, but you are definitely not a virtuous person. So the third biggest advantage of virtue ethics is that you will not only have a moral man, you would also have a dependable man. Do you understand that? And over whom you can depend, there you find pleasure. Do you understand that? Where there is inconsistency, sometimes you find displeasure. Do you get it? That's why you see that these are the advantages of virtue ethics. The biggest disadvantage of virtue ethics is it does not help you in paradox situations. During the situation of moral dilemma, ethical dilemma, two virtues clashing with each other, justice clashing with, say, courage, what to uphold? Do you understand that? Temperance clashing with, say, justice, what to uphold? Generosity clashing with kindness, what to uphold? Compassion clashing with rule of law, that's also a virtue that you have to uphold. So you don't know what to do in moral dilemma situation. That's a big disadvantage of virtue ethics. Second, there could be a debate upon what constitutes a virtue. What is the exact meaning of this virtue? There could be a debate around it, like we saw in yesterday's class, that we can have a debate on a simple virtue like justice. What is justice? So whose interpretation of justice is the right interpretation? How do we find out that? Isn't that challenging? It's really challenging. And the third is obviously that sometimes virtue ethicists are against general welfare. Do you understand that? Like, say, for example, think of this, that virtue ethicists would say that you should never violate the justice of any kind, or you should never go into the private space of a particular person. You should never do that. Okay. If that's the case, Aadhaar cannot be implemented. It's fully based on your private information, isn't it? Biometric data is so private to you. But if we don't have Aadhaar, we will not have the successful implementation of DBT scheme, direct benefit transfer, that is linked to Aadhaar. Also, you see, tax collection has also improved because PAN Aadhaar linkage has happened. So it is now very difficult to evade the payment of taxes. But everything starts with the enrollment of people on the basis of biometric data. But the collection of biometric data in itself is breach of private space. But you tell me one thing, Aadhaar, or as we have the Social Security Certificate in the United States of America, does that help or not to some extent? Does that help the administration? Yes. It also helps in establishing your identity. So there are so many advantages that you can see in that regard.